of minorities is it's minute. I don't even think it's a rounding error in some of their, calculations. So pragmatically, what do we do now that we haven't been doing that can move the needle going forward?
We actually don't do a good job of collecting data. We think we do. When I worked at the U.S. Olympic Committee, I actually created a scorecard, and you can actually Google the scorecard. It's like Team USA Diversity Scorecard, and it has to be public. So many companies do that, but the thing they haven't done, and something I've been working on almost any company I work with, and you can also Google Cape Inclusion, the company that we've been launching helps people identify at a very granular level where their diversity challenges are. And so the difference being is most companies say we're 30% diverse, whatever that number is, but they don't start breaking it down by what department, who are the individuals, and where they are responsible. So therefore, if we don't achieve it, I don't feel connected to it. It's out of control. This diversity thing's so big. How can they expect me as a manager to contribute? Because they don't know where they connect to it. That's why the data has to then be sliced by department and where it is. And I would agree, when your bonuses are connected to it, it will get done, because that's how businesses run. And that's my point. If we don't connect diversity to how businesses run, I'm totally against diversity committees. The reason being is we say, when we think of diversity, we often think, well, we have several people of color and women, I bet they could do it. We don't say, hey, we have accounting. Everybody in the company knows how to spend money. Therefore, let's get rid of the accounting department to save money, create an accounting committee, and everyone knows how to count money. This is good enough. No, that's complete failure, and we would know it by definition. But we've done that with diversity. Or we hire one diversity professional and say, hey, 7,000 employees, you need to support all of them, when no other department is asked to do that. So by definition, our diversity programs have failed because they've been designed to fail. And fundamentally, the pieces aren't there. You have to hold people accountable. You have to have somebody who's responsible, and they have to be staffed and given a budget so they could actually execute. Generally, what we've done is said, one person is enough, and then we think it's been taken care of. We check the box and we move on and wonder why nothing's happened. That's the problem. So fundamentally, yes, we have to have data, and we have to hold it in a way and share it in a way that holds everyone accountable, not just this big number of, we have 400,000 employees. It needs to be, what are we doing as a manager, and how are we holding that manager accountable?
Okay, thank you. I love hearing that, obviously. And again, our panelists and our audience is also reacting to everything that you're saying. Let me switch tack now. I'm going to go to Joy, who's going to actually look or discuss with us the topic of the digital divide in terms of access to technology. Joy, take it away.
Thank you, Connie. I want to focus on the digital inclusion. I think this pandemic has really shown how important it is to have access to technology, especially broadband connectivity. Today, more than 40% of the world's population are still not connected to the internet. And worldwide, 950 million homes still do not have sufficient broadband connection. And 80% of those connected still need faster speed. And in the US, there are about more than 20 million people who don't have access to broadband services. 2020, FCC reported the penetration of broadband services. So with fixed 25 meg and wireless 5 meg speed, the penetration rate in the whole country is about 94%. But in the rural area, the penetration rate is only 77%. So there's a huge digital divide, especially in developing countries and regions. Huawei has been in the business for 30 years, and we have been building a lot of connections in the world, but it takes many stakeholders to work together to develop broadband connectivity worldwide. In addition to building connectivity around the world, I think we need to improve digital skills. We need to provide more trainings to people around the world. And I think many companies are doing digital skill trainings to their employees and to their local communities. And Huawei is doing the same thing. We have like several programs in different parts of the world. For example, in Europe, we have a program called Smart Bus that has been running in Belgium, the Netherlands, Spain, and Portugal. The The Smart Bus is a mobile Wi-Fi equipped digital classroom that provides engaging, interactive, and fun learning environment for children. The kids are between 11 to 15, and they can come into the buses and just take digital learning. So the program has been covering like 20,000 students and also 5,000 parents and teachers. And the program also extends curriculum to special education schools as well. In Africa, last year, Huawei signed an MOU with UNESCO with the aim to provide digital skills and AI capabilities to people in Africa. And we also have a ICT academy that extends to almost 1,000 universities in 70 countries. And we also have like a Seeds for the Future program, where we bring students from different parts of the world, and they come to China to learn the Chinese culture, and they also spend a week in Huawei campus to learn about digital technology. And most of these students will eventually graduate and then enter the ICT industry. So I think there's really not a one-size-fits-all program. And I think we all need to continue to explore and innovate and find what is needed the most for the local communities.
Okay, someone has put a note in our chat saying that there is even a discussion that a digital divide does not exist. And I wonder, have you heard of that? I mean, I would, venture to say that most people think that there is a digital divide. We're going through a pandemic here in the United States where access to technology for students is really, the challenge that we're facing right now, let alone anyone else who doesn't have connectivity. So let's just clarify the statistics that you've shared about the digital divide. We can all look up. How widely embraced are that? Or do you come across this thinking that, no, it's not an issue?
Well, I think digital divide is really a big issue right now. I think in the US, people in big cities will experience pretty good wireless coverage or fixed broadband coverage. But if you go to the rural areas in Montana or Oregon, a lot of these areas, there's absolutely no coverage for miles and miles because just the space is too big. And sometimes it doesn't really make business sense for the operators to put in equipment and put in coverage in those areas. And in some areas, there's really no 911 coverage either. So, and outside of the US, in developing countries, if you think about Africa, right? Many places in Africa, electricity is a problem. And in those areas, it's very difficult to set up wireless base stations. So you have to use solar powered wireless equipment in those regions. And in the Philippines, right, there are thousands of little islands. And how do you get connectivity into those islands for people in the areas? So connectivity, digital divide is really a huge problem. And especially as you mentioned, Connie, during this pandemic, we have seen people in the rural areas have very difficult access to broadband. And so they cannot get access to school or telemedicine. I think that's something we really need to address with all the stakeholders and working together.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we all agree that there is a digital divide. You mentioned that some businesses don't see the business advantage because it's such a wide area to cover, but I guess we need to get past that. Obviously, it's never going to be, the business proposition is probably never going to be there. And I recall that at the start of the internet, if it were, I am sitting in Silicon Valley. I live 5 minutes from Apple's headquarters, down the street from the Apple garage. And our neighborhood, right in the middle of Silicon Valley, was the last to get broadband because we were, 0.5 of a mile past where the head office is. And therefore they had to invest in infrastructure and dig up some streets to go that last little bit, which of course, people here were up in arms because there are a lot of tech executives who live around me. And so we were able to to get broadband in the center of Silicon Valley. This is before wireless became a thing. But if you don't have people advocating, well, I think they're advocating for the access, but pragmatically, how do you fund it, right? So that's part of the challenge there, because there's never going to be a business case where it's going to be profitable in some areas. So that's number one. And number two, giving training and access to people. Again, I think it's something that people would agree with on paper, but is that a commitment we need to see every company make, every organization make? Just as they fund whatever charities or other initiatives they do, that should be one of their go forward commitments, retraining of people outside of their organization and helping to fund some of these efforts to bring technology and give access to underprivileged or under-resourced communities.
Yeah, let me just quickly address the infrastructure issue. I think it is very expensive to build infrastructure. Sometimes it doesn't make business sense to build fiber into the rural areas because fiber is very expensive. So that's why in the rural areas, people use wireless. And then in the Philippines, people use wireless to get broadband connectivity into the islands. So that's why it's very good to have private and public partnership. And I think that's one of the business models that have proved to work in many different places. So the public and the public sector, including the government, need to put in funding. U.S. actually has funding for rural areas to get connectivity, and the private companies. So they work together to build infrastructure in rural areas or developing countries or regions. And the other way to do this is to be more innovative in terms of your solutions, or sharing infrastructure development with like electricity or other infrastructure. So when you dig up the roads, right, if you plan it well ahead of time, you can put in the pipes for broadband, for electricity, and other things all together before you do that. And then instead of digging up the roads several times. So I think there are many ways that the public and private companies can work together to make it more affordable to rural areas and developing regions.
And it goes back to plan your work your plan, and know that your plan can change on a moment's notice. Okay, I'm going to move this along. We have another speaker, Mia, who I didn't have a chance to talk ahead of this session. So I'm going to turn it over to her. You've heard all of the discussion, Mia. Take it next where you want to go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mia Dan, and it's wonderful to be here today. So first of all, I'd like to say I've been enjoying this conversation so much, and I was literally clapping when Jason mentioned the change has to be more intentional. We can't just keep talking about it. So let me just start off by introduction. I'm Mia Shadand. I'm the CEO of Lighthouse 3. I'm also the founder of the Women in AI Ethics Initiative. We recently, which is meant to increase the representation, recognition, and empowerment of women who work in the space of AI ethics. So why does this matter? It's because we have technologies being unleashed on our society right now. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. You pick up your phone, there's artificial intelligence. There's your credit scores are determined by artificial intelligence. Whether or not you'll get care is determined by artificial intelligence. There's surveillance systems, which are based on facial recognition system. They're based on AI. So artificial intelligence impacts every arena of our life. And yet, the folks who are building these technologies are predominantly white and male. We are trying to change that in a very meaningful way and a very intentional way. We believe that women deserve a seat at the table. And I'll share some statistics with you. Right now, in academia, 80% of the professors, 80% of people of AI professors and instructors are male. In corporate in Silicon Valley, where I live in Oakland, California as well, very close to you, Connie, we've looked at the data, and 4% of the workforce at tech companies is Black. Barely 14% of the research papers which are submitted to conferences are by women. And with also the research that comes out and which is considered credible and which is actually floating out there comes from a very limited number of countries. It's usually some few countries in Asia, but it's mostly Western. So it's not representative of all our experiences or all our expertise. So we are leaving out a lot of that expertise. So bringing more women into the fold, bringing more women of color, bringing more regions into the fold, we hope to change that, because the lack of women, the lack of diversity in our development process, in the discussions of AI, it results directly into AI that doesn't work for everyone. There are systems that don't recognize darker skin tones. They don't recognize Black faces. Credit scores are skewed in favor of white folks versus Black and brown communities are not getting access to credit. They're not getting access to funding. They're not getting access to hiring opportunities. So we need to address this right at the beginning. So what does intentionality mean? And what are some concrete ways we can address it? So I'm channeling Ruth Bader Ginsburg, may she rest in peace. She was asked once, when will you be happy with the number of women on the Supreme Court? What is the number? What is the magic number? Is it 1? Is it 10? 2, 3? What is it? And she says, when all of them are women. And people were so shocked. And they're thinking, all of them as women? He says, yes, 4 years, for centuries, right? For centuries and 200s, we've had men, all white men, and no one has ever questioned that. So we need to change our mindset. And that's what I liked what Jason mentioned, and also what Joyce said. We need to reframe our thinking around normalizing this. If I go to a discussion, if I go to an event and I see a panel of all women, our first instinct is, oh, is this all women panel? Am I at an all women event? We need to change that. It should be normal to walk into an event and everyone on the stage is talented, expert women or people of color, which means some of us, the white folks in the room, may have to give up a seat. I've given up my seat for Black women as well. So that's one way we could start. We could start giving up some space and giving space to the voices that are not heard. But I also like to say, how do we change things within companies? Now, companies, can you make a business case for diversity? The answer is yes. There's research that shows more diverse teams tend to be more productive. They tend to be better for the bottom line. But again, that requires a shift in mindset. So I'll share a recent example. Timnit Gebru. Dr. Timnit Gebru was recently fired from Google, was just very recently fired from Google for raising some questions about the credibility of the research that they're putting out. And I like to say that we need more Timnit Gebrus within organizations because they are the moral conscience of these companies. And if it's up to all of us to support these voices, because if we don't, we'll continue to see this proliferation of just technologies that really don't work for humanity. They don't work for all of us. So I'll just pause there and take any questions.
Yeah, so there have been some points that I want to raise, but I think your acknowledgement that if we don't have people at the outset, systems are going to be designed with bias, whether unconscious or not, and that has ramifications since technology is now so pervasive. And as you mentioned, it affects things that a lot of people don't even know that it affects, like your credit score, or, I mean, certainly your access to healthcare. I think going back to Jason's point, and I'd like to we've heard from each of our panelists, and so I will now turn to the interactive part of this before I have 2 questions more to ask, but we'll do that in a lightning round toward the end. But data. In media, there is a big discussion going on right now in the past year about the lack of diversity in media, both in coverage and in newsrooms. And so a lot of newsrooms, including mine, have started what we call equity coverage or equity analysis. We look at who we have quoted in stories, who we have contacted, what the point of view is, who is on our team. So that equity audit that we're doing is for our content, not just our staff, but also what we're putting out in the world. And so data is exposing that rift and where you can see problems, but is everyone doing the right thing and collecting the data? Someone asked, Mia, if you want to stand up, and I think everyone wants to do the right thing, but pragmatically you're afraid or concerned that you might lose your job or lose your standing or lose whatever, little bit of authority or power you have in an organization, you know, I understand it takes courage, but pragmatically, how do you do that? I would probably say you're not working at the right place if you're afraid of that, but I'll let you answer that, Mia.
I thank you. That's such a great question. It's scary and it takes a certain amount of bravery, but let's be pragmatic because I myself am a brown immigrant woman. I'm a single working mother. I don't have a lot of privilege. To speak up means that I'm definitely expecting retaliation. I know these companies that I'm speaking up against or the causes I'm speaking up in favor of will garner me some hatred in certain circles, right? Because you're questioning power and people in power don't want to give that up. And then at the same time, there are folks who will step up because we are all here, right? It's thanks to folks like Deborah and others who've seen the need for us, for women like myself to speak up and other women who look like me, who may not have the platform. So the couple of ways that we feel could work is it's okay not to be vocal about it. We do not penalize. I do not believe in virtue signaling. You speak up and you do things which are right for you and that you're comfortable with, we'll help and support you either way. So we need to support everyone's ability to contribute in the way they are most comfortable. If you're more comfortable just donating to a fund which supports women, that's okay. Use your power for good, use your platform for good. Maybe you can just invite more women, people of color to your events. You can make a push if you are in the position to give someone an opportunity, a job. Give it to a person of color, give it to a woman, give it to somebody who's deserving. And I would love what Jason said. For centuries, we have promoted and given opportunities to men just based on the potential. Give women the same chance. We're not asking for more, right? We're just saying treat us equally. So that's one way you can do it. Join organizations where not everyone has the ability. I start with that, right? Join an organization that is ethical, but let's be realistic. The dominance of this industry by a handful of companies just means the opportunities are shrinking. So we'll have to do the best we can within the organizations that we are part of. And if you're in a room where you're seeing someone who's quiet, I've been in rooms. There have been 10 white men. I'm the only person of color, the woman of color. You need folks in that group. If you're one of those people, give that minority, give that lone person a platform and a voice, because it's not enough to invite them to the table. You also have to give them the opportunity to speak up and make it okay for them to speak up and not go like, oh my God, what did this person just say? We have to also build that tolerance, and we have to build that empathy when people bring us their concerns to be able to absorb that. So those are just mine. I'm sure others have other ideas as well.
Yeah, I'll open up to the other panelists. What other ideas? Who wants to go?
Connie, I'll jump in here, and you had raised something I think is actually a very good point, and that is ERGs. Like, what's the point of ERGs, employee resource groups? And to me, this is the reason why they're important. That many times you're experiencing something and you feel alone, and it's nice to be able to go somewhere where other people might be able to validate my own reality. That they also support you in the sense of my own sanity. And I can tell you from my own experience. Working at a company, I remember I started counting days. How many days would it go before I would see another brown face? And I could easily go a month. So the ERG also provides this support network where it's nice to go to a room where you just can see another face that looks like yours. And sometimes we begin devaluing that, like somehow the fact that you want to talk to somebody who has a shared experience is somehow negative. It's not. Like, that's just a normal human experience to want to speak to somebody who is experiencing the same thing. I think we need to begin validating that, because that's important for our own personal mental health. But the second piece here, I think, is it's also a place to go, you know what, we're all experiencing this. How might we as a group begin making change? Now, sure, we don't have all the power, but what are the resources that we could share, or how might we negotiate and make change in this organization? Or we might go, you know what, it's too big, we all want to leave. That's a choice too. But I think sometimes we should validate that, because that is a reality. Like, you know, sometimes we think, somehow, if it's, you know, obviously men can attend a women's ERG, or white people can go to an African-American ERG, whatever it might be. But this mindset of somehow whenever people of color get together or women get together, it's whining and they don't understand, to me is, again, indicative of what privilege does and how that impacts us as underrepresented groups, that somehow when we get together, we're doing something negative, that in fact, it can be empowering, that I'm experiencing something in this culture that makes me feel completely unwelcomed. And it's nice to go somewhere just for my own mental health where people go, yeah, I'm experiencing that too. So then I can say, oh, okay, it's not just me, but I'm not just being gaslighted here at this organization. And then the second piece is, well, how have you negotiated this? Maybe I have skills that we can share. So I do think ERGs in this context can be very effective, and that they can be a way for organizations to move. They can be a way for individually for us to continue to work somewhere, because we often make tough decisions. Man, my kids got to eat. So sometimes I take jobs that I wish I didn't have to stay at. I don't have that individual kind of wealth where I can just get up and walk out when things are bad. And I have to make that decision. Is this fight worth it? If I had to go 2 months looking for my next job, can I afford to do that? And if you can't, I don't think there's any embarrassment about that. I mean, and it might be nice to be able to go somewhere that at least help support you in some way. So I do think that's one of the ways we can empower each other to make change in organizations.
So Jason, someone has asked, thank you for that. And as a support structure, I think it's amazing. I found all of my mentors and mentees through employee resource groups. So I don't want to diss them. There's a right way to do it, obviously. I think it's about the question was, what are some of the downsides of these D&I committees explicitly? Some people are not fan of committees, again, because of not the support aspect, but the power dynamic of where it goes as well. And then Deborah, will turn it over to you after Jason answers that.
Yeah, sometimes I think when I hear what's the negative impact, I think it is the, you can be in a room sometimes where it's non-productive. Everybody's just complaining and no one wants to go to a room where all we do is complain. I think the line has to be drawn between validating a person's reality versus making them feel like somehow something's wrong with them. Or if we just go there every day to complain, yeah, I would agree. They can definitely spiral. But I think the goal here should be reminding people that, yeah, we can be productive, but I think people need a moment where they can share the reality. That doesn't necessarily mean you're whining.
I will also say that employee resource groups, if they're not really supported by the culture of the company, by the executives of the company, I have seen employee resource groups go really terribly wrong, where some of the brightest talents left the company because they were so disenfranchised by the way the companies were responding to it. So it's very important to get the ERGs right, and I often see that not happening. I also think it's very important, once again, to be looking at all the intersectionality. It's important to talk about it from women. It's important to talk about it from brown and black, but we have to look at all of the diversity groups, and we often don't. People with disabilities are also part of the diversity groups, and so are LGBT, and so are the different cultures. And so we still have to look at all of the diversity and inclusion groups, including, the diverse men's groups. And so I'm looking forward to the conversations being, and thank you, David, for the purple hair comment. If I'm going to go gray, may as well have some purple in it too. But I also want to continue to point out the importance of some of the comments that Joy made. I'm in Virginia, right, not very far from the capital of the United States, and yet I cannot get good Wi-Fi coverage. And I had put it in the thing over here, but there's a real problem in rural America in that we are not getting the connectivity. So it's interesting. We use privilege a lot, and I'm white. And what do I do with my white privilege? I make sure that I'm giving up my place at the table. I'm making sure that more diverse people are speaking. And somebody said to me, well, just put more chairs at the table, Deborah, but y'all know it doesn't work that way. And so I keep using the word deliberate, but making sure that we are rewarding the corporations like Huawei that are trying to make a difference for all of us, including refugees and other disenfranchised groups, looking at this very broadly from a global lens, not just from a Silicon Valley or a United States lens, I think is also important. Making sure that all of our voices are really being heard. And once again, thank you, Witty, for having the courage to have these very powerful conversations. And thank you to the Mias of the world that say, wait a minute, what do you mean none of the women are being included in these AI lists? How do we make sure that we really applaud and make sure that people know about the work that corporations like Huawei are doing, or things that Jason's doing. I mean, Jason's wowing me with all of his amazing comments, and I'm glad that Jason as a man is here. So we have to be allies, but also accomplices to each other. Some of the things that I've recently done during COVID-19 to support causes that I really care about. Now I'm 60, I've got purple hair. I'm not really afraid of people anymore like I used to be. I worked in corporate America my whole life until I became an entrepreneur in 2000. But I think learning to, taking the time to really understand your corporation. If you're working for a brand and you don't feel you can really speak up as a woman or as a diverse person, who in the company could you be allies with? You be the accomplice. So I think there's different things that we can do. But at the same time, I thought Jason brought up some good points. I'm not going to go into a company and start, getting myself fired because I have an opinion. But at the same time, I think more and more the younger people are not willing to work for brands that are not going to support society. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I
Okay.
just tag
Joy.
along? Yeah. Can I just, Deborah, thank you for the comments. I think really technology can help so much in, diversity and inclusion. And I can just give you some examples how technology is helping people with disabilities. Because right now we have, 5G in many parts of the world. 5G has very high speed and low latency. Actually, it can help blind people ski. So that we just this year, we launched a program together with carriers in Europe. A blind person with glasses can be directed down the hill of the slope with technology. And that's just absolutely amazing. And also we have apps that can help visually impaired children, because usually it's very difficult to diagnose visual impairment in infants, right? Because they don't really follow the doctor's instructions. But with technology and AI, they can be, there are programs that can be set up to diagnose the visual impairment so that these infants can receive medical treatment early on during their age, so that they don't the impairment do not become permanent. And also for hearing impaired people. So it is really amazing what technology and AI can help to include people so that they can get access and they can live a normal life. So I just want to add one point on that.
Mia, I haven't given you a chance. Do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you. I just want to applaud. I wish Zoom had more features that we could actually go and applaud, because every time I hear a point, all three of my fellow panelists make, I just want to go, yes, that's exactly it. So I would say one is I do feel we should shine a brighter light on the good that technology can do, because I feel like it gets buried in all the headlines about all the dark sides, all the dark applications of AI, whether it's used in defense and used in surveillance and such. We should be channeling and funneling all our resources towards AI for good, where technology can be used for humanity rather than the ones against humanity. So that's one. And I want to go back, Connie, to something you said was very key about a lot of these technologies. If you remember back where they came from academia, they came from government funding. So we should be thinking about digital access as the social or public good that everyone has access to, instead of right now, it's just all these companies build to government funding, to academia research, and build their companies on top of it. I feel now it's time for them to start giving back. You mentioned, is there a business case to be made? If you think about, they owe those technologies to really the tax funded, these are all tax funded, right? These are social goods. Then we should start thinking about this, and those benefits should go back. We shouldn't be waiting for a business case, or else we'll never solve the digital divide. And it's not like rural Virginia. I live in Oakland. There are places here in Oakland. San Francisco Bay Area has the highest unemployment. We have millionaires and billionaires here, and yet people are going hungry. And there are amazing folks who are doing a lot of good work trying to feed those people, but it's unconscionable. that in 2020, we're the highest number of millionaires, billionaires, and still people are going hungry, and they don't have access to a lot of these technologies. So something needs to change, and our framing of what the companies owe to society, what they owe to humanity really needs to change and shift in the right direction.
Okay, that's going to lead me to the last part of this discussion, which is our lightning round questions. I'm asking each of the panelists to answer 2 questions. And the first one is, the COVID pandemic has changed almost every aspect of our lives. I'm sure we can all agree on that. And it's changed the way we live, we work, we entertain, even how we exercise or don't eat. I have become the master of sourdough starters, which took me like 3 months. And I don't know why I did it. I just got swept up in the sourdough starter craze, surreptitiously exchanging cans in the middle of the night with people socially distanced. Anyway, what is a lesson that you think we have learned, or something that has been brought to light? We talked about the digital divide for sure, and the lack of access to technology for students, but that you think is worth embracing as we go forward, something that we've learned that is positive that we can take forward. And I'm gonna, Mia, you're on my screen now, so I'm gonna put you on the spot. You start, and then we'll do Joy, Deborah, Jason.
Okay, so what can we do? Is that the question? I'm sorry.
What have we learned through this pandemic that you think we should continue? I mean, we talk about flex schedules, work at home, changing the way we meet. There are lots of things that have changed in our culture, but what is something that you think is positive that has come out of it that you hope will move forward?
I feel I've worked in Silicon Valley for many years, for many large tech companies. We are finally coming to the realization that it is possible to work from home. Shocking, right? A lot of these companies that actually build this technology did not have work from home policies. So more flexibility has come out of it, more access. And again, Deborah will agree that now all the tools which all these companies said, no, these are not available. Disability access, accessible tools were not available. And all of a sudden, they're now become available. I think we should continue. We should not just, it shouldn't take a pandemic to give access to folks. It shouldn't take a pandemic for us to give more flexibility to working mothers. As a single mother, I feel like it's such a blessing to have that flexibility. I left the corporate world because I couldn't work from home. There wasn't even an option back in the day. So I feel let's continue those lessons and support women, support folks who don't have the privilege or the support system. And let's just keep this moving forward.
Okay, Joy, you're up.
Yeah, I will say this pandemic really accelerated telemedicine. Telemedicine has been in place since almost 20 years ago, but it has been moving very slowly. But this year, you can see from pretty much everywhere in the world, telemedicine has just become a main practice for doctors and for any clinical practices. So I think in the US, you have seen companies like Teladoc and Livongo. They are moving very fast to address, to receive patients and online. And in China and elsewhere, I think telemedicine has become a main practice. And then along with telemedicine, now people can really, become more accessible to the best doctors available, not just within your own city, your own country, but elsewhere around the world, right? I mean, US has some of the best doctors in the world, from Mayo Clinic, from MD Anderson. These are some of the best doctors, but people not in the city don't have access to them, and they have to travel remotely. They may have to find an apartment, live next to the hospital. And people from outside of the country, it's almost impossible for them to get access to these best doctors. But now with telemedicine, people really can get access to the best available medical, doctors. And AI is playing on top of this as well. With COVID-19, now we are using artificial intelligence to help diagnose COVID-19 patients remotely. So a lot of these practices are just amazing. And I think this will continue, and this will, help, our society so much. So.
Thank you. Deborah.
Yeah, great point. Great point about the telemedicine. We've been using it with my family, and it makes me wonder why I ever went to the doctor. I mean, in person when I can do it online. But I also think, and Mia, I'm going to build upon Mia and then Joy's comments, but we learned how important accessibility is. We all need access to technology, and we learned that, especially when 40% of the children in the United States had problems getting online. So just building upon Joy's comments, education for all. We've been saying that for a long time, but we actually have the power to do that. When we talk about we can't hire diverse people because there was one CEO of Wells Fargo said, they can't find the talented Black and brown people. Okay, well, we hear that a lot about the community of people with disabilities. Can y'all even work if you're blind? Yes, we can, and we can do a great job. And so I think understanding that we are human beings that have lives beyond work. So the work-life balance, it's not that unusual anymore for a dog to come or children to interrupt, or maybe your parents, if you're taking care of your parents. And so understanding that we are working while we live our lives and really continuing to encourage this work-life balance, while once again continuing to be so deliberate about including more diverse voices, and really understanding that, that young boy that has a disability in India, he might be the person that someday solves some of our biggest problems, or the young girl, or whatever you want to put in there. But I think that is the opportunity to continue to humanize technology and to appreciate that we are diverse humans, and that's a good thing.
Jason.
Yeah, not much I can add. Obviously, these people are very sharp. I'm just lucky to be here taking air. So I don't know that I would add much. I do think it's nice to see that we can actually raise kids and do our jobs. I think it's probably pretty much brought that to the forefront, as Deborah made a great point about. And I do think we have created a little bit of a sense of urgency about bridging the digital divide. I mean, when we know young kids can't go to school, there's a problem. And to me, that is a good thing, even though it's highlighting this negative thing. I do think as a country, we feel more an intense sense of urgency that that's something that has to be corrected. So
I'm going to add one thing and then go to the last question. The thing that I hope that we continue forward is that I have been using a smartphone for many years, and I've been using for lots of things, but the last thing on the list has been to make calls. And while I love Zoom and that we can see each other across the world, it's great to have conversations where we can actually just talk to each other on the phone and not be tied to Zoom, and go for a walk and have walking meetings and not be tethered to our desks and to video. Okay. The last question I'm going to ask each of you is, and we have 5 minutes left, so I'll give you each a minute or about a minute to answer the question, is, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the near-term future, say next 1 to 3 years, in trying to address some of these issues? Deborah, I'm going to start with you because I know you had a point of view that you shared about the incoming administration and how that might affect change here in the United States.
Well, as we talk so much about diversity, I've been very worried about what is happening in the United States against China and other Asian countries. And so I think we have to come together, and we have to stop deciding that certain countries are bad. I just think it's ridiculous to make, there's 1,500,000,000 people that live in China. So the world must come together to start solving these biggest problems. I'm so tired of, anyway, I won't talk about what I'm tired about. Let's talk about what we're optimistic about. But I just really believe that if we all come together and celebrate what people are doing right, what corporations are doing right, and then build upon that, and really, really work hard to stop deciding that certain people just are not worth living. When my daughter was born with Down syndrome, and people kept saying, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Well, I actually have a really beautiful, amazing daughter that please take the time to get to know her, and you will benefit from that. So let's stop deciding that Jason doesn't matter because he has a beautiful color skin, that Mia doesn't matter because, she is a single mother. I just think we've got to be more deliberate about wanting the world to work better for everyone, including our planet, moving forward. So thank you, Connie.
Of course. Um, Mia, you're up next. Then Jason and Joy.
Beautifully stated, Deborah. Thank you so much for that. I would say I'm an eternal optimist, and I do believe that things can only get better. I also have the benefit of surrounding myself with amazing women who are working so hard to make sure that technologies that we are releasing into the world are working for all of us. So when you surround yourself with the right people, I feel it just fills you with hope and optimism. But I do feel we are at this inflection point. We can take the lessons from COVID. We can take the lessons from our last 4 years, right, in the United States, and think about how can we make a better world? How can we prevent that from happening again? The key is to learn. I'll just say I'm optimistic that we can still build a world that represents all of us, and we can take care of each other, and that COVID should have made us more empathetic and care for each other. So I'll just leave you with that.
Thank you. Jason.
Yeah, for me, I think even though it's been very difficult and complicated, I think we are beginning to look at our problems as a function of a systemic problem rather than episodes. I think we looked at Rodney King as this was an episode, and we trained around it and it was over, and somehow we thought as a country moved on. And this summer we learned, no, it's still happening, and George Floyd was proof of it. And I think we're now starting to take a more complicated view of privilege, issues around gender, issues around race. And so to me, even though it's been uncomfortable, that change in perspective that these are not episodes, but part of a connected series of events that we need to begin dealing with gives me hope, because I think by having a more complicated view of how to deal with issues around gender will give us an opportunity to come up with solutions. So that's why I'm optimistic.
Thank you. And you raised very important points. Let's hope that 2021, we build on 2020 and kind of put it behind us and just move forward. Joy.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very optimistic as well. I'm just excited that technology can help us address many of these challenges. And we talked about technology can bring equity to education, to healthcare. And then I think one other big area is environmental protection. I'm excited what technology can do for our environment. I think now the world leaders and the general public and the private companies are all realizing the importance to protect our environment. And people are using technology to help on that effort, especially with 5G. I think 5G is designed with environmental issues in mind. So the 5G base stations is much more energy efficient than 4G. And these base stations are actually intelligent. So if there's no data traffic being transferred, the wireless cell can shut down automatically. So it just generates huge energy efficiency worldwide. And now we can use artificial intelligence to monitor illegal logging in the rainforest, and we can monitor endangered species in rainforest. So we can use technology to protect our environment. That's just, that's amazing. We all know we need to do everything we can to save the environment. So I'm just very optimistic on the impact of technology and how we can leverage this technology to make good for our world.
All right, well, on that note, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. Joy, Deborah, Jason, Mia. The conversation was fantastic, and I hope our panelists continue to speak out on these very important topics. And I hope all of you listening take away some of their talking points and embrace them or talk about them further, because that's how ideas spread, one person at a time. I'm just going to pull out some words from today. So if we could do a Wordle. Accomplices and allies, being deliberate, being intentional, being inclusive, embracing tech for good, using whatever power you have to speak up with no judgment about what that power is or how you use it, not apologizing for the choices that you make in supporting an organization. What else? Let's see. Well, there's lots of other talking points. I encourage everyone to re-listen to this conversation in the future. Thank you very much, Witty, for hosting this panel, and it was a pleasure moderating this conversation. Everyone have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Connie, thank you so much, and thank you to the entire panel. This was awesome. There's so many great comments in the chat box, so please check those out. And I'd want to mention that we've got about a 4-minute break, and our next panel is going to be starting at 9:30. So at 20 past, which is in 4 minutes, we have an energy management stretch break for you. So it's an opportunity to get up and take some deep breaths and move around. So we've got like 3 minutes. So go grab a cup of coffee or whatever you need, and we'll see you there. And then we'll start back at 9:30 with the next panel. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to add, Kathy, all those will be in the same Zoom room. So the stretching, no need to go anywhere else until 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time.
Awesome. Elise will be with us in a few minutes.
Thanks, everyone.
Elise, would you like to begin?
Yes, let's do it. Well, hey. All right, can you hear me, Josh?
Yes, you're good. Please proceed.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so much energy. I was so excited to be in the last group, and we're going to take a little time to unwind so we can replenish and bring in lots of energy. My